Then also, of course, the great Jubilee that he ushered in. And I love the line Benedict used, he rightly reclaimed for Christianity that impulse of hope, which had in some sense faltered before Marxism and the ideology of progress. And of course, this tug of war continues on in our own time.
One of the characterizations Benedict used about Blessed John Paul was that he called him a titan who opened wide the doors of culture and politics to the Pope, to the Christ. That was the invitation John Paul made, and he said as a titan he accomplished that in his own life. And Benedict gave his own answer to the questions about why this took place when it did. Yes. He said, and now the longed-for day has come, and with a great enthusiasm he said, John Paul is blessed, and it came quickly because this was pleasing to the Lord, and pleasing to the Holy Father himself, and pleasing obviously to this large crowd gathered and all those following around the world. It's a beautiful homily, and it's a very Benedictine homily in that he spends time meditating on the scriptures, and he uses the first reading and he says the Apostle Peter's homily doesn't say that you should rejoice. He doesn't say that you should believe. He says, in fact, he uses a statement of fact. He says, you do rejoice, you do believe. This is the reality of the Christian life. And Benedict, the old professor, points out that actually he's using the indicative tense and not the imperative tense, because this is the reality of the Christian faith, which has been lived so boldly and so clearly in the life of the new blessed. And then finally at the end, a very moving passage. Benedict speaks personally about working for 23 years, how much he loved and esteemed John Paul, how much John Paul's faith and prayer sustained him as a model, and then how finally he became a rock, even though he became weak physically. And then, not in the prepared text, but as an addendum, Benedict said at the end that we're here in this square where John Paul blessed us so often, and then he, referring to his own funeral homily of 6 years ago, he said, in fact, yes, John Paul's at the window of the Father's house, and he sees us and he blesses us. A beautiful homily, a beautiful witness of Christian faith, and a beautiful, really, tribute of one man to his master, his teacher, one friend to another, and one pope to his predecessor. A beautiful moment in the square.
I'll say, and certainly you see these images, that beautiful, faithful crowd, and you can hear a pin drop in St. Peter's Square right now.
Raymond, I just got back. It is awesome beyond telling. And they're riveted to his words if they're not close to the altar, looking at the side screens. And there is a recollection attitude among the faithful. There's joy, there's also the great spirituality, listening to their beloved Blessed John Paul, to his successor, the amazing words he said about his predecessor.
And we've heard from people in Trinidad and Tobago, a youth group in the Archdiocese of Miami who were up all night waiting for this moment and are watching now live. So it really isn't only the people here, it's people around the world crying in their living rooms and with their groups in churches and sanctuaries and hospitals in some cases, the suffering that John Paul so embraced in his last days. It became, in George Weigel's words, his final encyclical of teaching us how to die with true dignity.
And Raymond, many of those suffering today from various illnesses are in the square. I went around to the front, just near the statue of St. Peter, where a lot of those who are in wheelchairs are, and the special care and love they're being given, not just by authorities or by police, but by the faithful, opening up a path to let them go through with ease. People who have known suffering perhaps even their whole lives.
It is a very extraordinary moment to look at Benedict there as the choir sings the Credo, because the theme of the homily was belief. Right? Blessed are you who have believed, and he said what Blessed John Paul did is he was a believer. He was a pope, he was a great statesman, he changed the world, he was a historical figure, but at his heart he was a Christian believer. And again, Benedict alluding to in the homily John Paul's favorite biblical description of the office of Peter, which is from Luke 22:32. When you have turned, Peter, you must strengthen your brothers in the faith. And Benedict said, blessed are you who have believed, and blessed is John Paul, because because he helped us to believe. He strengthened our belief.
We are going to return back to St. Peter's Square. This is EWTN News live coverage of Pope Benedict's beatification of his predecessor, Blessed John Paul II. That beatification part of the ceremony was early on when they had the formal declaration, the presentation of the relics, and now the Mass continues following Pope Benedict's homily. We will let you enjoy that in all its splendor. A beautiful day in Rome. We're privileged to bring this to you and delighted you could join us.
Fratelli e sorelle, a Dio Padre, ricco di misericordia, rivolgiamo alla preghiera della Chiesa.
Oremus pro Ecclesia Sancta Dei.
Que la Iglesia, que vive de la Eucaristía, memorial del sacrificio pascual, reúna a todos los renacidos en el bautismo.
The first prayer of the faithful, read in Spanish, is for the Church and for unity.
Oremus pro Pontifice nostro Benedicto.
Que notre Saint-Père Benoît XVI, qui annonce à tous avec une humble franchise la splendeur de la
The second prayer is in French. It is for our Holy Father, Benedict XVI, that he may continue to proclaim the splendor of truth.
La Sainte Mère du Rédempteur.
Oremus pro humane vitae necessitatibus.
Die verfolgten und gedemütigten Christen mögen dem Herrn mutige
The
Herzen
third prayer, read in German, is for persecuted Christians around the world, that they may place their courage in Christ.
zugunsten der Menschheit teilhaben.
Oremus pro universo mundo.
Да последуют правители народов и наций.
The next is in Russian. It's for those responsible for peoples and nations, that they may rediscover the urgency of proclaiming the gospel of life.
Oremus Dominus pro familia Dei odie hic congregata.
That the Lord's disciples gathered here today enjoy and praise for the gift and the evangelical witness of Blessed John Paul II, under the guiding light of faith and reason, may be tireless in their search for truth.
Dominum deprecamur.
Padre Celeste, mostri dallo Spirito Santo che è Signore dalla vita, innalziamo a te le nostre suppliche, esaudiscile per la potente mediazione di Gesù tuo Figlio, l'unico Redentore dell'uomo, e rivive e regna nei secoli dei secoli.
The offertory hymn now begins, accompanying the offertory procession as the altar is prepared for the sacrifice of the Mass and the gifts are brought in procession towards the Holy Father. chalice that will be used by Pope Benedict XVI during this Eucharistic celebration is one that John Paul II himself frequently used when he was celebrating Mass in St. Peter's and in St. Peter's Square. The bread and wine that will be used during the sacrifice of the Mass have been brought up to be blessed by the Holy Father, while the concelebrants prepare the altar. These concelebrants include one of the men who acted as the private secretary to John Paul II for 10 years, Polish priest Father Mawryczki. The Pope's personal private secretary, of course, is today Cardinal Stanislaw-Dziewicz, Archbishop of Warsaw. He, of course, is here present in St. Peter's Square, along with this immense representation of faithful from Poland. St. Peter's Square, down the Via della Conciliazione and beyond, is literally packed with people. The estimates are now well over 1 million people participating in this Beatification Mass for John Paul II. Interesting that many of the people who brought umbrellas with them thinking it was going to rain today are now using those umbrellas to protect them against the sunshine this beautiful day for this extraordinary celebration.
Frate sud meum ac questum sacrificium acceptabili fiat apud Deum Patrem omnipotentem. Suscipe quesumus Domini plebis Tue oblationes, ut confessione tui nominis et baptisma te renovati, sempiternam beatitudinem consequantur, per Christum Dominum nostrum. Dominus vobiscum. Sursum corda. Gratias agamus Domino Deo nostro. Vere dignum et justum est equum et salutare, te quidem Domini omni tempore confiteri, sed in hac potissimum die gloriosius predicare, cum Pascha nostrum immolatus est Christus, ipse in verus est agnus, qui abstulit peccata mundi, qui mortem nostra moriendo destruxit, et vitam resurgendo reparavit, qua propter profusis Paschalibus gaudis, totus in orbe terrarum mundus exultat, sed et superne virtutis ad cancelice potestates, hymnum gloriae Tuae continunt, sine fine dicentes. Sanctus est Domine, et merito te laudat omnis a te condita creatura, quia per Filium Tuum Dominum nostrum Iesum Christum, Spiritus Sancti operante virtute, vivificas et sanctificas universa, et populum tibi congregare non desinis, ut a solis ortus cad occasum, oblatio mundo offerato nomine Tuo. Supplices ergo te Domine deprecamur, ut ec munera que tibi sacranda de tulumus, iodem Spiritus sanctificare dinieris, ut corpus et sanguis fiant, Filii Tui Domini nostri Iesu Christi, cuius mandato hec mysteria celebramus. Ipse enim, in qua nocte tradebatur, accipit panem, et tibi gratias agens benedixit, frecit, deditque discipulis suis dicens, accipit et manducate ex hoc omnes, hoc est enim corpus meum, quod pro vobis traditur. Simili modo postquam cenatum est, accipiens calicem, et tibi gratias agens benedixit, deditque discipulis suis dicens, accipit et bibite ex eo omnes, hic est enim calix sanguinis mei, nove et eterne testamenti, qui pro vobis et pro multis effunditur in remissionem peccatorum, hoc facite in meam commemorationem. Mysterium Fidei. Icito Domine, iustem Filii Tui salutifere passionis, nec non mirabilis resurrectionis et ascensionis in celum, sed et prestolantes altum ius adventum, offerimus tibi gratias referentes, hoc sacrificium vivum et sanctum. Respici quesumus in oblationem ecclesiae Tue, et agnoscens hostiam, cuius voluis stimulatione placari, concedit vi corpore et sanguine Filii Tui reficimur, Spiritu Ius Sancto repleti, unum corpus et unum spiritus inveniamur in Christo.
Ipse nos tibi perficiat munus aeternum, ut cum electis Tuis hereditatem consequi valeamus, in primis cum Beatissima Virgine Dei Genitrice Maria, cum beatis apostolis Tuis et gloriosis martiribus, cum beato Ioanne Paulo, et omnibus sanctis, quorum intercessione perpetua put Te confidimus adiuare.
Ecos Dea nostre reconciliationis proficiat, quesumus Domine, a totius mundi pacem atque salutem. Ecclesiam Tuam peregrinantem in terra, in fide et caritate firmare dinieris, cum famulo Tuo Papa nostro Benedicto, cum episcopali ordine et universo clero, et omni populo acquisitionis Tue. Ad esto propitius votis huius familie, quam tibi a stare voluisti, in die glorioso resurrectionis Domini nostri Iesu Christi secundum carnem. Omnes filios Tuos ubique dispersos, tibi clemens Pater miseratus coniunge. Fratres nostros defunctos, et omnes qui tibi patientes, ex hoc seculo transierunt, in regnum Tuum benignus admitte, ubi fore speramus, ut simul gloria Tua perenniter satiemur, per Christum Dominum nostrum, per quem mundo bona cumta largiris.
Per ipsum et cum ipso et in ipso, est tibi Deo Patri omnipotenti, in unitate Spiritus, preceptis salutaribus moniti, et divina institutione formati, audimus dicere, Pater noster, qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra. Dare nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et dimitte nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimittimus debitoribus nostris, et ne nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo. Libera nos quesumus Domine ab omnibus malis, da propitius pacem in diebus nostris, ut ope misericordia adiuti, et a peccatusimus semper liberi, et ab omni perturbatione securi, expectantis beatam spem, et adventum Salvatoris nostri Iesu Christi. Domini Iesu Christe, quid existi apostolis tuis, pacem relinqua vobis, pacem meam do vobis, ne respicias peccata nostra, sed fidem ecclesiae tue, iamque secundum voluntatem tuam pacificare, et quadranare dinieris, qui vivis et regnas in saecula saeculorum. Pax Domini sit semper vobiscum.
In Spiritu Christi, quia mortuis resurrexit, offerte vobis pacem.
The congregation exchanged the sign of peace. The Holy Father exchanges the sign of peace with the main concelebrants, Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone, the Cardinal Secretary of State, and the Dean of the College of Cardinals. He also embraces Cardinal Stanislaw Živić.
Ecce annus Dei, ecce qui tollit peccata mundi, beati quae mani vocati sunt. Domine, non sunt indes ut intres ut ecte meum, sed tantum diquerbe et sanabit anima mea. Corpus Christi custodit me.
thousands of priests are making their way through the congregation for the distribution of communion as the choir prepares to sing the communion antiphon. The words are taken from the gospel we heard at today's Mass, the gospel according to St. John, in which Jesus invites doubting Thomas to place his hand in the holes left by the nails.
You see the distribution of communion beginning, and there are so many people in this piazza and spilling outward. I imagine all of them will not get communion today.
They have a pretty good system for providing Holy Communion to those in the piazza,
yeah.
But really those in the surrounding streets, it's not possible for the priest to reach them. And even those in the piazza, in order to maximize the number of people in the piazza, there weren't chairs put out for the whole piazza, because of course more people can come in standing. However, that means at communion time there's less room to move. So probably most people will not have a chance to receive communion, especially those outside the square. But they make a good effort.
I'm amazed at the number of priests. There are hundreds and hundreds of priests, thousands,
well,
I think.
Probably thousands have come. There are several hundred will be assigned to distribute Holy Communion. Of course, you know, many priests would, especially for the 27 years that John Paul was Pope, would feel a special kinship towards him. Many of the priests who studied in Rome during the time I was here would have met the Pope, would have attended his private Mass. He had a custom that was fairly well known, if not universally known, where you could send your chalice. Normally when a priest is to be ordained, his parents or someone close to him buys him a chalice, or sometimes his parishioner would give him a chalice that belonged there before. You could send that to the papal household or deliver it, and the Pope would use it for Mass, and then they'd send it back to you with a note saying what date. And my parents, who are watching today with their friends back in Calgary, bought me a chalice, and the Holy Father, now blessed, used it, which means it's what would be called a second-class relic.
That's right.
So,
does that mean my hand's a second-class relic?
No, not your hand, Raymond.
Darn it. Well, it touched John Paul many, many times.
It did. Well, many, yes. Not
and
your
Mother
hand.
Teresa.
Yes.
And a few others.
So it'll be nice when I return home next Sunday to use that chalice and to explain to the people this was used by a saint, by a blessed. So so many of the priests here would have had some connection, and even from a distance. You remember one of the customs that John Paul had was he wrote a letter to the priests of the world on every Holy Thursday.
Correct.
From 79, his last one was 2005, published just a few weeks before he died. So there are many priests who have had that connection.
I want to point out something that we've been seeing really ever since Benedict took the throne of the papacy. There is, as people proceed forward for communion, there is a prie-dieu set up in front of him, and they kneel to receive.
Yes.
And he wants to make the world and all Catholics see the sacrality and the reverence that should be shown toward the Blessed Sacrament. Yes, we're seeing this here as these heads of state and various dignitaries come up to receive from the Holy Father.
I think these are people, ordinary pilgrims who are chosen. I don't think they ever choose the heads of state so as to avoid possible controversies. Benedict commented in this in his book, Light of the World interview book, and he said, look, let's be clear. You can receive communion on the tongue and the hand. He said, I've done it both ways myself. I'm not giving a negative judgment on one or the other. He said, but at the large papal masses, which, as you can see, are logistically complicated with thousands and tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, he said, I want it to be very clear that someone important is here. Something important is happening here. This is not anything other than the worship of the true God. And he thinks that the receiving communion in the fashion you just described emphasizes that point. And it's a reminder that no matter how in our own parishes we might distribute Holy Communion, that it should be done in a reverent way that also makes it clear that someone important is here, something important is happening. And here we see the two sisters, Sister Marie Simone Pierre, the Miraculata, and Sister Tobiana, the ones who carried up the relic, making their own thanksgiving after communion.
And you know, Father, as we watch this communion being distributed throughout this enormous piazza. It reminds me of the number of notes and emails I've had in recent days of people around the world who are having not only viewing parties for this, and they're very, people are together in prayer around this great moment, but it's not something frivolous like watching a royal wedding. But I have friends in Cleveland, a friend of mine, Umberto Fideli. He had a mass yesterday evening. I believe the bishop came and said mass at a church. He invited friends. Then they had a dinner for the vigil, waiting for this moment. Right. So it's very interesting the way laity around the world are having their own celebrations and preparing themselves for John Paul II becoming blessed. Yes. John Paul.
And there are many people watching, if they're watching live very early in the morning, if they're watching on the rebroadcast late at night, yes. Who would be participating spiritually, making spiritual communions here. And you can see the umbrellas there. The white and yellow ones are actually the ones that they send a acolyte with each priest with the Blessed Sacrament, and that protects the priest if it were raining. It's not raining. The other umbrellas are up because it's very sunny, but also gives a little reverence to, like a little procession, like a canopy at a Corpus Christi procession, and they accompany the priests throughout the piazza.
It also makes it easier to see where Mass is. If you see the yellow and white umbrella,
what we're seeing now
there's the Lord.
Is actually, this is outside. This is at the other end of the street.
Mm-hmm. Near the Tiber.
And there are other places around Rome, including the Circus Maximus where we were last night, where people are gathering simply to watch on the screen, which of course is they're a few miles away, watching. And now we have this is the Papal Masters of Ceremonies who are coming to receive communion at the end of those selected to receive communion from the Holy Father, and then they'll take the Blessed Sacrament away. And usually after the Pope distributes Holy Communion, they wait for a few moments of silent reflection, of thanksgiving. One of the things that Benedict has introduced into the Papal Masses is that after the homily and after communion, there's an official announcement asking people to maintain a reverential silence in a moment of reflection. And they do that whether he's traveling, like for John Henry Newman's Beatification last September in the UK, or here for the Masses in St. Peter's in the Vatican Basilica.
Well, John Paul is certainly smiling down on Rome with the beautiful weather, and for these pilgrims who traveled so far, some of them walking for days to be here and to take part in this moment of history and remembrance of John Paul the Great.
And as Benedict said at the end of his homily, he said, John Paul blessed us so often in this very piazza, 27 years worth of papal blessings and masses, and another historic moment in St. Peter's Square. There are so many, obviously, that take place there, and I think now the Holy Father is preparing himself he'll say his address before the Regina Coeli, which he always does on Sundays. And
now on the right-hand side, Father, of the screen there in the piazza, there's that big white covering on the extreme right-hand side. That has a huge image of John Paul under it, standing in the sun, but it hasn't been unveiled yet for whatever reason. It was out there for a few days, and they covered it up.
Oh, did they cover it up?
It appears so. Maybe they're going to unveil it at the Mass for Thanksgiving. I don't know.
It could be. They're always doing work cleaning this enormous basilica, and so there's actually scaffolding inside the colonnade. And last year there was a large logo of the company that was helping to pay for it. I think they thought that was a bit commercial for beatification, so they put a large image of John Paul on that. And I think the idea is that to cover it up for the Mass, because not the whole point, but the symbolic high point of the beatification formula is the unveiling of the image. So if you had a three-story one off to your left, it would take
takes away the drama.
I imagine that they'll probably return that image in the next few days.
Well, it has been fantastic sharing all of these events with you. This is EWTN's live coverage of the beatification of Pope John Paul II. The whole world's eyes are on Rome right now, and their hearts are with that man. The image hanging outside that balcony in front of St. Peter's Basilica, Blessed John Paul II, a pontificate that so moved the world and so many of us, altering lives, touching hearts, and the challenge and the witness goes on. The bounty of teaching left by this pontificate is something we haven't reflected on very much. But Father, you're more familiar with that than most.
Well, one of the things right on that point, Raymond, I'd mention is that today, amongst other things, liturgically we talked about Divine Mercy Sunday, first day of May, St. Joseph the Worker, octave of Easter, etc. May 1st, 2011 is the 20th anniversary of Centesimus Annus. Centesimus Annus was the third and final social encyclical of John Paul II, social encyclical meaning the teaching of the Church on economics, politics, and culture. It was written 2 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was John Paul's reflection on why communism failed, which he said it failed because it had the wrong idea about God and the wrong idea about man. And looking forward, it was his great charter of the free society. What does it mean to have a free society? What role does virtue play in that? How can we live and make good choices in our economic freedom, our political freedom, our cultural freedom? And certainly, as me as a Canadian, you as an American, we look at our culture and we say, does this reflect the dignity of the human person? What things we watch on television, not EWTN, of course, but other things. We look at our economic and political choices, and that great charter of the free society, Centesimus Annus, which was released 20 years ago today, that's one of the documents that lives on. It was very influential in my own life, in my own shift from economics, which I studied before, to a broader vision of the human person, which led eventually to my priestly vocation. But that document and so many other teachings are now foundational for the Church. And I personally delighted in that coincidence of his beatification with Centesimus Annus. But there are many other documents other people might have a greater resonance for them. But certainly, 20 years after that document, it's as relevant today as it was then. Perhaps actually, to be honest, more so. Sadly, in Canada, the United States, it's more relevant, his warnings, than they were.
Well, they're coming to pass. So many of the warnings are coming to pass. It was a prophetic document, like so many of his teachings.
And so the teaching of John Paul now, which has been very influential, will continue, and the teaching of Benedict, who sees himself, as he's described himself, as one to implement and to deepen the reception of John Paul's teaching in the life of the Church. Interestingly enough, he mentioned in his homily, a little bit more than in his funeral homily. He spoke about John Paul as the one who followed Christ, the follower of Christ, a disciple. Today, Benedict, speaking about, he spoke about his work as a bishop at the Second Vatican Council, his teaching as Pope, and so Benedict himself is highlighting the fact that we make a blessed in the Church to recognize his holiness. We make a blessed out of a Pope to recognize not only his holiness, but also his ministry as the universal pastor and teacher of the Church.
And in the coming days, the body of Pope John Paul II will be transferred. It is presently in the upper basilica in front of the tomb of St. Peter. It will be moved to the chapel of St. Sebastian, which is just to the left of the Pietà, for anyone who's visited the Vatican. So in the coming days and months, pilgrims will be able to visit him with more ease than was available down in the crypt, where it was kind of cramped space and it was harder to access the remains of the Holy Father.
Popes are buried in the crypt of St. Peter's, but they're once blesseds and saints are permitted to be buried in a church. So now that he's beatified, he's being brought upstairs, as was John the 23rd, when he was beatified, and so pilgrims will have an easier time visiting his remains in the chapel of Saint Sebastian.
But in the meantime, there's going to be veneration of his remains in the upper basilica throughout the day into the night. This evening.
Just for today, the body's actually in the basilica. We saw those images during the beatification.
And we'll be bringing you full coverage of that later.
After the Mass is finished and the Holy Father's left the square, pilgrims are going to be invited to come into St. Peter's, and it's going to be a bit of a recreation of the days of after the death, between the death and the funeral, where so many came to pay their respects. So John Paul will remain in the basilica throughout the morning, or throughout the afternoon, and they announced publicly that they will will keep the doors open until the last pilgrim comes. So usually it closes at 7 in the evening. If people are there at 10, if people are there at 2 in the morning, they've said they're going to keep it open. And in that sense, it's an accommodation and a celebration of the number of pilgrims who will come. And so when you visit St. Peter's the next time, you'll see John the 23rd. You'll see Pope Pius the 10th, and now Blessed John Paul II.
But it's been a simply splendid day. Surprising, because originally this was to be a day plagued by rain. All 3 days were supposed to be rain-filled. And
well, it's probably those sacrifices of all the Polish pilgrims who came down here that obtained for us the grace of this very beautiful day. And it would have been joyous, I suppose, if it had been raining. But it's better that it's now sunny. The Holy Father is now saying the prayer after communion.
This is EWTN's live continuing coverage of Pope Benedict XVI presiding over the beatification of his predecessor, Blessed John Paul II.
And the Holy Father just said,
Je salue avec joie les délégations officielles, les autorités civiles et militaires des pays francophones, ainsi que les cardinaux, les patriarches, les évêques, les prêtres et les nombreux pèlerins venus à Rome pour la béatification. Chers amis, que la vie et l'œuvre du bienheureux Jean-Paul II soient source d'un engagement renouvelé.
Pope Benedict XVI is greeting all those from French-speaking countries who are present here in St. Peter's Square this morning. He invites us all to pray to Blessed John Paul II to help us to build a civilization of love that respects the dignity of each human person created in the image and likeness of God, with special attention being paid to the weakest.
I greet the English-speaking visitors present to today's Mass. In a particular way, I welcome the distinguished civil authorities and the representatives of the world nations who join us in honoring Blessed John Paul II. May his example of firm faith in Christ, the Redeemer of man, inspire us to live fully the new life which we celebrated Easter, to be icons of divine mercy, and to work for a world in which the dignity and rights of every man, woman and child are respected and promoted. Trusting in his prayers, I cordially invoke upon you and your families the peace of the risen Savior. Mit großer Freude begrüße ich heute alle Brüder und Schwestern deutscher Sprache, unter ihnen die Mitbrüder im Bischofsamt und die verschiedenen Regierungsdelegationen.
The Holy Father now offers his greetings and his blessings to all the German-speaking pilgrims and visitors present at this Beatification Mass.
Die Liebe Christi in seinem Wirken verkörpert hat. Bitten wir den neuen Seligen, dass auch wir frohe Zeugen der Gegenwart Christi in der Welt sind. Der Friede des auferstandenen Herrn geleite euch auf allen euren Wegen. Saludo con afectos a los peregrinos de lengua española. y en especial a los cardenales, obispos, sacerdotes, religiosos, seminaristas y numerosos fieles, así como a las delegaciones oficiales y autoridades civiles de España y Latinoamérica. El nuevo beato recorrió incansable vuestras tierras, caracterizadas
Pope Benedict
por la
XVI
confianza en
reminds the
Dios,
Spanish-speaking visitors and dignitaries and pilgrims here how often the newly blessed went to their countries, how often he visited Latin America, and he invites them all to follow Blessed John Paul II's example of love for Christ and for his church.
Que desde el cielo os acompañe siempre su intercesión, para que la fe de vuestros pueblos se mantenga en la solidez de sus raíces y la paz y la concordia favorezcan el progreso necesario de vuestras gentes. Que Dios os bendiga. Dirijo uma cordial saudação aos peregrinos de língua portuguesa, de modo especial aos cardeais, bispos, sacerdotes, religiosos e religiosas, e numerosos fiéis, bem como as delegações oficiais dos países lusófonos vindos para a beatificação do Papa João Paulo II. A todos desejo abundância dos dons do
And to Portuguese-speaking dignitaries, visitors and pilgrims, the Holy Father recalls the words of Pope John Paul II that we've heard so often during this celebration, the words that are written large around St. Peter's Square: do not be afraid, open wide the doors to Christ.
Assim Deus vos abençoe. Serdecznie pozdrowienie kieruję do Polaków.
And finally to Polish-speaking pilgrims.
Biorących udział w tej beatyfikacji osobiście lub za pośrednictwem środków przekazu pozdrawiam kardynałów, biskupów, kapłanów, osoby konsekrowane i wszystkich wiernych. Pozdrawiam przedstawicieli władz państwowych o terytorialnych na czele z panem prezydentem. Wszystkich zawieszam stawiennictwu waszego błogosławionego rodaka, papieża Jana Pawła II. Niech wyprasza.
I commit you all to the intercession of the newly beatified John Paul II. I ask him to bless your homeland with the gift of peace, unity and prosperity.
E rivolgo infine il mio cordiale saluto al Presidente della Repubblica Italiana e al suo seguito. Con uno speciale ringraziamento alle autorità italiane per l'apprezzata collaborazione nell'organizzare queste giornate di festa.
The Pope thanks the President of Italy, Giorgio Napolitano, who is present at this celebration, and he thanks all the Italian authorities who helped make this celebration possible. He thanks the Mayor of Rome and the various associations and volunteers who assisted in guaranteeing the safety and success of today's beatification ceremony.
Il mio riconoscente pensiero va anche alle istituzioni e agli uffici vaticani in tanto impegno vedo un segno di grande amore verso il Beato Giovanni Paolo II. Infine, rivolgo il mio più affettuoso saluto a tutti i pellegrini raccolti qui in piazza San Pietro, nelle strade adiacenti e in diversi altri luoghi di Roma.
Finally, the Pope's thoughts go to all the pilgrims gathered here in St. Peter's Square, but also in the streets and piazzas surrounding St. Peter's Basilica.
Non si sono risparmiati per offrire anche ai lontani la possibilità di partecipare a questo grande giorno.
He also greets all of you who are following the ceremony either on radio or television.
Si sentiva particolarmente vicino. Giungo uno speciale saluto. Ed ora, in spirituale unione con il Beato Giovanni Paolo II.
And now, together with Blessed John Paul II, we turn our prayers to Mary, Mother of the Church.
Della Chiesa, il cammino dell'intero popolo di Dio. Regina Celi letare, alleluia. Resurrexit sicut dixit, alleluia. Gaudet letare Virgo Maria, alleluia. Oremus. Deus, qui per resurrectionem Filii Tui Domini nostri Iesu Christi, mundum beatificare dignatus es presta quesumus, ut per eos intercession genitricem Virgine Mariam, perpetua capiamus gaudia vitae, per iundem Christum Dominum nostrum. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sanctus. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sanctus. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sanctus. Pro fidelibus defunctis requiem aeternam dona eis Domine. Requiescant in pace.
After the recitation of the Regina Coeli, we now await the Pope's final apostolic blessing.
Dominus vobiscum. Sit nomen Domini benedictum. Adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini. Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus.
Ite missa est, alleluia.
And that concludes today's Mass, this Mass of Beatification for Pope John Paul II, a moving and absolutely stunning event. I think everybody would agree.
It was just that. It was a day of great joy and great emotion for the whole church, certainly for Pope Benedict, and just a privilege, a blessing, a real grace to be part of it.
Well, thank you for sharing all of your insights with us and for being here. Father Raymond D'Souza, our friend Joan Lewis, for all of her contributions. I also have to thank our gang in Birmingham, Doug Keck, my producer James Faulkner, and of course my always by my side producer Chris Edwards, who's here in Rome. We want to remind you to join us for the Thanksgiving Mass tomorrow. We'll be coming to you Monday morning with that Mass of Thanksgiving from St. Peter's Square. Our friend Mary Shevlin will be providing the commentary for Vatican Radio, and you'll hear that in its entirety. And we thank you for being with us as well. From Rome, I'm Raymond Arroyo. We'll be seeing you in the coming days. Be sure to follow us on EWTN.com. Go to RaymondArroyo.com. I'll be Twittering or tweeting and Facebooking throughout the day. God bless. Bye now.